everybody. Welcome. We've made it to Module 3. I can't believe it. It's moving fast, but I wanted to record a lecture because I know that this is pretty dense stuff, and I want to make sure that everybody is, what I'll say, mowing what I'm growing here, and make sure that you're set up for success, because this information is so critical for you making your products in this course. So let's go ahead and hop into it. And when you see LO, by the way, let me go back real quick. Whenever you see that abbreviated, that is kind of shorthand. That's very common in the industry to see learning objectives shortened to LOs. So if you see that, please don't think I'm talking about is it LOS? Yeah, it's learning objectives, LOs. So just wanted to throw that out there. All right, so this video, I'm just going to cover two things. One, I'm going to talk a little bit about learning objectives and make sure you feel really confident in the difference between terminal and enabling. I have some examples. And then I also want to do a quick comparison of linear versus branched e-learning designs. Okay, so let's talk learning objectives. This may or may not be your first class in the program. I think most of you have had at least one, but you may not be familiar with learning objectives, or you may be like, what's the point of learning objectives? So I want to spend a little bit of time talking to you about them and also share my own personal opinion here, and just know that it is a personal opinion. So your mileage may vary when you're out in the workforce. So when I think of learning objectives, I think it's really critical that you see them as this, what is in it for me? It guides what we're doing. It is kind of our blueprint or roadmap of what it is that we're making. And time again, I see so much horrible e-learning out there because they didn't take the time to write out the objectives. And I think especially as you get more seasoned and comfortable in doing this kind of work, I know I've been guilty of it myself. I just go ahead and jump right in and start building and prototyping. It becomes automatic. It really does. So it may feel like a chore right now, but I'm telling you, there is a time as you get more seasoned, you hop into autopilot mode and you automatically know how to write this stuff. So don't be so hard on yourself if you're struggling. It just takes time. You got to go through the rain to get to the rainbow, as my grandmother would say. So just be patient with yourself. So we want the learning objectives to help guide people to what's in it for them. However, here is my hot take. I think that learning objectives are mostly for the instructional designer. Yeah, let me say that again. The learning objectives are mostly for the instructional designer. And I see a big difference between higher education and corporate in this. So often you see learning objectives listed in a course, and I'm sure you see them in this course as well. And a reason why you see it kind of student facing is it depends on the institution and if it has a subscription to a quality assurance model called, well, it's not really a model, but a program called Quality Matters. And I'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute. But one of the big things in Quality Matters is, students need to know the learning objectives. Now, where I sit, and in my experience, especially in a corporate setting, let's say that you get a email saying that you need to take this e-learning. You click on it, and then you find out you got to sign into your learning management system. And if you're like several places, you have a 2-factor authentication. So then you're grabbing your phone or figuring out what your code is and putting that in. And so it takes like 5 minutes to even get to the blasted thing, right? So you're proud of yourself to even open it. And then when you open it, I feel like you have a very short window to get someone's attention and get that hook. I hate to see that wasted with a learning objective. So where I like to see learning objectives in a corporate setting is a couple different places. One, I like to see it in the description in the learning management system of the course. So it's like, in this 25-minute course on widgets, you will learn how to design your own widget and troubleshoot widget machines. Pretty simple, right? Or better yet, I like to couple all learning experiences with some kind of a communication that lets people know what's in it for them, and they get the learning objectives that way. So again, that's my hot take. I realize that in this program we teach learning objectives and we talk about how critical they are. I'm not saying they're not important. I just don't think they belong in the beginning of every learning experience, because often it is for you as the designer to help you build. So I hope that makes sense. And also, last point here, don't let your subject matter experts tell you what these need to be. All right. This is your job. So they will come to you and like, hey, we need this amazing learning experience on widgets, and they need to know everything about widgets. It's your job to determine, okay, what is it that they actually need to know? But better yet, I always focus on beyond what they need to know. What do they need to do with the information? Right? So how is that going to make them a better widget maker in their role? I think that is the important question, and something that so many, especially new instructional designers, just miss, because you finally get that project. You've been in a program like this, and you're like, oh goody, I get my first project, and then you want to please people. And I feel like we're in the people business, but who are we pleasing if we give into that wants me? That's the question I want you to ponder. And I let that kind of be my North Star. And I have used that to push back in various organizations and situations, because I don't think one person should dictate everything for an organization. And I think we have a very special role and responsibility to the business, as well as the front line that we often design for, to make sure that we are good stewards of their time and resources, because you can't get a refund on someone's time wasted. And I think that's really important. All right, get off my philosophical soapbox here. Now we're moving and grooving. Okay, so before we hop over into the learning objectives, real quick, I also want to share with you my thoughts around assessment. And I share this with you because I think this will also help you understand the learning objectives a little bit more. And so essentially, when I think of terminal and enabling, I like to compare it to what I say formative and summative assessment. And so when I think of formative assessment, the easy way I remember what formative assessment is, I think of it as for learning. So knowledge checks, example, like the little reading quizzes in the course. They're not high stakes. They're just to help guide you, making sure that you're comprehending some of the content in the course. Nothing high stakes here, right? You're not going to fail this course if you miss all of these quizzes, right? Summative, I think of learning, or summative, right? So that would be like an end of course exam, some like cumulative assessment, so like your final project in this course. So use that as your basis. When I think of terminal versus enabling, I think the terminal objective is the course objective. So what do they need to do at the end of this whole course, right? So what is the end goal of everything that we're wanting them to do? And then the enabling objective is a module or unit objective. So let's think of this as a big curriculum, okay? So the enabling objective would be like the little module units objectives, but whereas the terminal would be the overall arching objective. So what do people need to be able to do? This is enabling again, to achieve the terminal objective. So if you can get through the enabling objective, it helps you unlock the terminal objective. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so let's try an example. And so let's say that you have a learning objective here. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I'm going to pause. I'm going to add some nice little thinking music, and I want you to think here, upon completion of this course, students will be able to understand the basics of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So I will give you a few moments. I will cue my sick beats and let you think, and I'll come right back. All right, time's up. So let's talk about this. let's just explore the actual objective here. Upon completion of this course, not the worst thing that I've ever read, not the most exciting either, students will be able to understand the basics of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. What does that even mean? And honestly, what does it mean to understand something? Is that just to have knowledge of it, to know how to look it up? What does that even mean? So I'm hoping that you read this and were scratching your head and thinking, that's really not the best. So let's break it down and give some examples of what would be better. So an example of the terminal would be, create a peanut butter and jelly sandwich considering one's dietary restrictions and taste preferences, right? So we'll say it's not good enough to understand about a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but we're giving some kind of a overall goal that we want to make sure that we can make some form of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in line with someone's maybe dietary restrictions and taste preferences, thinking, maybe they can't use peanut butter, maybe they can use another nut butter, or maybe there's, an alternative there. Maybe some people don't like white bread, maybe some people want pumpernickel or wheat bread or whatever that looks like. And so an enabling objective would be differentiate between different types of bread. And we could, split hairs here. We could talk gluten / gluten-free, actual bread versus like maybe a pita, or even better, don't you think like an everything bagel would be awesome with this? Okay, I'm starting to get hungry for lunch. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful to kind of deconstruct those. All right, so I also want to talk a little bit about feedback, specifically feedback and as we're building out these scenarios. And so you may be wondering, what's the purpose of feedback? And so I want you to think about these 3 key criteria. So I think feedback can really help with engagement. And so feedback can kind of be that guide on the side, right? And allow someone to understand the why. Now, here's where I get on a soapbox here, and you'll see why here in a moment. I think when you are explaining out the why, I think it's really dangerous to add in new information here. We'll pause, let you think on that. Okay, now that you've thought on it, let me explain why. You don't know, and I'll show you here in a moment, you don't know what sequence people are going to go through. Now, in a linear one, you do, but in a branching, you don't know. There's kind of different ways that people can get to the content. So if you're introducing something new, the likelihood that someone will see it and someone won't is a coin flip. So I really discourage you to think that way because it's a really poor user experience. All right, anchor, involving them, using like a common language or having like a style or something, it can really make them feel part of it. One of my favorite things to do, and I will show you how to do this at some point in this course, is especially in articulate storyline, you can build a variable that gets someone's name. And so even in a feedback, showing someone's name, I think is really a powerful thing. As silly as it sounds, just seeing your name in something seems more personalized. And finally, you can point them back and give them more assistance in the feedback. So one of the things I like to do when I build is, let's say that you miss a question 2 times. I like to point you back to where I covered that in the material and have you go back and then try it again. And in that way, again, it seems like it's adapting to me. I feel like I'm part of it. I feel like I'm important. And isn't that what feedback's all about? You don't want to make people feel like they're not important or part of it. You actually want to include them and give them what I'll call a nice, warm content hug. Yep, that's the power of feedback. All right, so let's go through some different examples of different objects. So this one is kind of similar to the one that you all went through, the facilities one, but this is an example of a direct linear, very basic, right? I did it about tying your shoes. I don't know if anyone else is a big SpongeBob SquarePants fan. I grew up on SpongeBob, so I really love me some SpongeBob. Squidward's my spirit animal in case you're wondering. But, so you're going through, you're learning how to tie your shoes, you do the loop-de-loop and pull, and your shoes are looking cool. Bonus if you know the song. Okay, sorry, I know that might be in your head the rest of the day. So again, pretty common. This shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. Very common. You see a lot of these in the wild. All right, so if you're looking for a linear scenario, it could look something like this. So you get the start point, you get the content, and then you have your first decision, and then feedback, content, decision, feedback, content, end. Okay, so there's not really branching here. It is scenario based, and you can get different feedback. But as you see, it goes back to the same, or you just get the feedback and you get the same content. So you are getting a very similar experience depending on what you choose. Your feedback is a little bit different. But as you can see, your content and your decision points are the same throughout. All right, so this is, this might be a little difficult to see here, but essentially what this is a really complex example of a problem-solving branching scenario. Travantis is a really great company to check out their website. They have a lot of great examples. They won multiple awards for some of their soft skills training specifically. So as you can see here, if you can follow this, the greens are correct decisions, neutrals are no impact, and then the bad is the negative impact here. So it can be a little bit tricky, especially with the arrows to look at, but this is a really, I'm going to say, robust example of a scenario. And just looking at this, I can tell that probably the total number of minutes of this experience, it's easily 45 minutes or an hour, because look how complex this is. And imagine how long it takes to build this stuff. And that's another thing that I'll talk about here in just a moment. All right, so you may be wondering, this is all good and all, but I need to understand the difference between the two. So Martha Stewart, who's an Opal grad, actually shared this amazing table, and then Dr. G shared this with me, and I love it. So if you're looking for kind of, I'm going to call it a table of truth about scenarios, here's a way that you can think about it. So in a linear, and again, linear, think of it as one force path. It could definitely be a lecture. It can be scenario-based, but it can't be a branching scenario-based because you have one force path, right? So when you have a branching, that means that there's multiple paths that you can choose. Meaning, if I went through something and, my partner went through something, we might have two totally different experiences. Whereas a branching or nonlinear, no one force path, sure, it can still be a lecture. Yes, it can be scenario-based, but the key indicator here, it is a branching scenario-based. So you may want to be referring back to this throughout, especially as you're reading this week. Please feel free to do so. Okay, so if you are curious about some of what these look like in the wild, Dr. G shared a list of these examples. It is listed in the README for the week to kind of guide you through everything that you need to do. I recommend spend a little bit of time and dive into these and go through them. And, I think that will also help kind of get the wheels turning for you as you're figuring out what it is that you're eventually wanting to build. All right, so going back to the linear e-learning, if you're looking for some strengths and areas of opportunity, the reading this week when Connie Malabat, I always mess up her last name, I'm so sorry, has this more in depth, but just to give you a high level overview, some of the strengths of a linear is it's a consistent experience. Everyone's going to get the same information the same way, everybody experiences the same thing. And then from a design perspective, it is much quicker to build and get it out the door, right? Whereas a linear for areas of opportunity, it can be a little bit harder to show that kind of cause and effect and impact because you're not letting people make decisions. And then it is a little bit lower fidelity when it comes to real life situations, makes it a little bit more difficult to keep it what I'll call, real life and that what's in it for me factor, right? It's just kind of this generic content. And it doesn't necessarily have to be generic. I guess I shouldn't say it that way. But again, I hope you're understanding there's no individualistic perspective of it, if that makes sense. Whereas with branching, it is very problem based. It can be more realistic. And one of my favorite things about branching is what I'm going to call the replayability, meaning you want to see what happens when you pick the other one, right? And I'm a big video game person. I love video games. And there was a series of video games called the Telltale games. And I'll show a quick little snippet of that here in just a moment. But they really focused on kind of these replayability decision points and telling these stories. Also, they're not without their fault. So some areas of opportunity is no one has that same experience, and it can certainly take longer to plan and build. Like I said, that Cervantes example, I guarantee you that thing probably took I would say over 100 hours of development time. I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. And it's also harder to maintain it and do quality assurance on. If you have one little thing that's broken, it's like a strand of holiday lights, right? If you have one bulb that's burned out, then you're trying to figure out what's going on with the rest of them. These things are massively difficult to do quality assurance on. So my next lecture, I am going to spend some time talking about quality assurance. And I'm also going to be talking about designing for mobile and then also computer, because I think that will also be helpful for you as you're thinking about what it is that you want to build. But that's it for today, and hopefully this was helpful. And my tip for everybody is tell someone you love them today. Hope that's helpful. As always, you have any questions, concerns, feedback, let me know. Thanks. See you online.